am really excited to share the results of this video with you. One of the losses when Mitsubishi stopped making metal clay products was PMC Aqua. This is a rehydrating fluid that revives dried silver clay better than if you only used water to do so. Overworked and dried silver clay loses elasticity, which water alone can't repair, but rehydrating products do. They help return dry clay as closely as possible back to its original workability. I haven't used a replacement product for PMC Aqua until now. When I came across Project X Clay Rehydrating Fluid from Clay Revolution, I reached out to ask if they would send me a bottle to try and test out so I could report back to you. This isn't an ad, but I did get the product for free. I'll tell you right now, I think it's great, and I'm planning to use it going forward. If you want to go straight to why I came to this conclusion, skip to the 10-minute, 30-second mark. If you want to see the slightly ASMR process of me reviving dried clay to get to my conclusion, that's what's coming. What I wanted to find out was, 1, would putting it on the dry clay in advance of sitting down to work on it make the process go any faster? And 2, more importantly, would the clay revived with the Project X product be higher quality than clay revived only with water? In other words, is it worth it? I have a bunch of dry silver clay that I want to revive. They are bits and pieces of old designs. So, following package instructions, for one set of dry silver clay, I'm going to put drops of the product on now and then set them aside while I do other things for about a week until I can come back to them. One thing I like to see here is how the product beads up and sits on the clay. It gives me a sense of control over where I'm putting it, and it seems to give a good chance of soaking down with equal distribution into the clay. Although if it does run off, that's okay. Ultimately, I want this to be all over the clay. This set, I'm putting Project X on for the first time today, the actual day I'm going to work on all of this. And even though this is a lot of tiny flaky pieces, the product mostly does a good job of sitting on top of them too. Here I'm using a little brush to just distribute it a little more. Quick note here that I did this entire experiment twice because I started and then lost some footage. So the pieces that sat with Project X for about a week are going to be replaced with these pieces from here on out. These also sat with Project X for about a week before I worked on them. So here are the two sets, and I'm going to start now by putting distilled water on both from my misting bottle. I know that these are all hard and dry, and breaking them up to give the liquid more surface area to absorb should help move the process along, but these are all so dry that I'm finding it's not worth my time at this point to try to get through more of it. So I'm going to let it rest for about 15 minutes with the distilled water and then come back to it. And here's a set that is also dry, and today I'm going to start hydrating this set with only water. After letting them all soak, I chopped them up again, gave them a little more water too. Please remember as I go through this that I am intending to do this all in one day, but if you want to do less of the labor part of this, you can put your dry clay in a small enclosed humidifier and let it rest much longer in between work, which would save you a lot of this manual mixing. Here already, I'm starting to see some progress. Some of the smaller pieces are quite workable, and the results have a nice creamy quality. Some of the thicker pieces are still quite dry and almost too hard to chop, so adding more light spritzes of water and moving on. Similar results here. Some of it's very soft, some of it's very hard. The one with only water is pretty soft, but I'm not really surprised because there weren't any really dense pieces in this set. So this is the one that first had the Project X days earlier, and I'm deciding here it seems like it needs a little more. And then also for the one I started today, it seems at this point like it could use a little more. So I also put some on those really dense, bigger chunks. This is what everything looks like at this moment. So far in the process, I haven't been able to distinguish a distinct advantage between any of these, but I think these are all on the verge of being soft enough to really turn into a clay form. So let's do that and see if there's any difference between them. I'm going to go even faster through this part, and this is what I found. After giving these all the same amount of attention and rotation, the set that had the Project X on it days earlier is the first to lump up in a consistent manner. It's actually quite ahead of the others, so at this point I am thinking that putting the Project X on in advance did give it a head start. What I did particularly notice was that when I went back to the one with water only, this one had a really subtle, gritty quality to it. It's almost a little bit sand-like. I'm not sure that's going to come through. You might have to be intimately acquainted with the clay to hear the difference, but here, as I go through this, I can just tell this is not reviving in that creamy way at all, like the other two are. The one from today is catching up. In comparison, the water one still feels a little like playing in very fine sand, but I did get it to lump form. It's coming together, just took a little more work. So this is my first set. It's sticky, as you can see, but I'm able to roll it into a snake, which is a great first test. And it also takes a very clear impression of a fingerprint, which is another great test. I do believe in putting the clay into a sealed space like a little bag and letting the moisture continue to permeate before I use it. The second set is catching up. It's maybe just the slightest bit lumpier than the first set, but again, this is why we put it away. I do believe that those lumps soften just from sitting in a bag. And in fact, after I took out both Project X sets the next day, after they had sat sealed for about 12 hours, I couldn't tell a difference between them, and so I actually at that point just mixed them together. Here's the before. They're going off for their 12-hour rest. At no point was the water-only clay quite so pleasant, but I did get it into a lump and into a bag, and it also rested, and the next day, this is what I had. On the left, the two Project X sets are now combined. The center clay was revived with PMC Aqua, and on the right is our water only. So my preferred test for clay is to roll really fine snakes and then wind them up. And the reason that this is a good test is because one, does it roll? This is a challenge to the clay to make it so thin, and if it holds together, good sign. Secondly, if it rolls up, is it smooth or is it cracking? Does it make nice curves? Or is it breaking? This looks great. I did that fast, so it's not the loveliest coil, but that's not what we're looking for. With the PMC Aqua Clay, I get the same results. really smooth if you think about what these looked like yesterday. Then onto the water, and this one surprised me in how well it rolled out. It had a little bit of resistance there. And also, as I'm leading the clay around here, it's just a little less responsive. This again is a subtle difference, but right here, it doesn't want to drape in quite the same way. And as we look closely, those seem to be the beginnings of tears. But overall, I'm actually surprised how well this coiled up. And now I'm going to do what I consider the real test. Often we don't have our hands on the clay just once. Maybe we make a form and then put some or all of it back in the bag and then use that same clay again later. And what we want to know is, can this revived clay do more than one thing? Can it be used a second time? So I'm going to squish each coil and then re-roll and recoil them and see what happens. And this is where the magic is revealed, because the Project X version still looks wonderful, still worked as I wanted it to. The PMC Aqua version also worked as I wanted it to. And the water version, well, this is what happened. I did finally get it rolled out, but it has this fatal flaw, so I tried again. And if you've ever been here before with dry clay, you understand the frustration. You can see that this is not going to work. And I could add more water at this point and mix it in again, and then the clay would probably be usable, but that's kind of the point. This is a very high maintenance version of the clay, and I would have to be constantly remoistening it, mixing it in, letting it rest in order for this clay to do what I wanted it to do. I do think that reviving silver clays through any method has a limit. However, it is clear to me that this product significantly extends the working time of fine silver clays. And that is my experiment.